Is media law academic at Curtin University and the Australian correspondent for Reporters Without Borders. Thank you very much for taking your time. And there was another raid today, this time on the ABC. That'd be our version of their version of RNZ, I guess, wouldn't it? So
2GB.
Pretty serious stuff.
For a guy who did a story on some reports of asylum boats coming down, right. And then suddenly the Home Affairs Ministry or department comes in and says, "Oh, we'd like you to help us with your inquiries." No. Your contacts are unimpeachable. You will die in a ditch for those contacts.
Yeah, he was adamant. He said,
yeah, that's what he said. The journalist said,
not today, not tomorrow, not ever,
and not ever.
Now for some breaking news. The sky is blue, the Pope's Catholic, and Twitter makes you stupider. This comes from a team of Italian researchers who followed 1,500 students from 70 high schools in Italy, all studying the 1904 novel The Late Mattia Pascal. Half the students analysed the book using Twitter to engage with their classmates and lecturers, posting quotes and their own reflections. The other half relied on traditional classroom methods, and they were assessed based on a test measuring their understanding and comprehension. Now, according to the researchers, using Twitter reduced performance by 25 to 40%, saying they couldn't get the nuance and complexity of the particular assessments, particularly among higher achieving students. So quite interesting. So you're both active on Twitter, maybe James a bit more so. Does this match up with your experience?
What? People have trouble with nuance on Twitter. What? What craziness is this, Wallace Chapman? How many intellectuals did it take to crack
change
that
a
one?
light bulb? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But haven't they expanded the word count so you can write essays now on Twitter?
No, they haven't expanded it enough. I think if you're using Twitter for any academic writing, it's usually frustration at the academic institution that you're working for. I don't think it should be doing any serious academia in 180. I mean, the only job you're qualified for is to be President of the United States. You're not actually qualified for anything real.
What do you think, Jennifer? Do you think that through Twitter and other forms of social media, I suppose, actually enable more intelligent, open discourse, or do you find that Twitter shuts it down? What's your experiences?
Look, I think James is right. Nuance? What nuance? There is no nuance ever, is there? Yeah. On Twitter, and that's the problem. That's the problem. It's either someone... When it went from the haiku, the 128, was it? 114 characters, to 200 and something, it became a soapbox. So the whole thing changed completely at that stage,
I don't think it's to take away from anyone who uses social media because they're in a position where they do struggle to communicate face to face. But I do think that when we cannot see the facial reactions of a person who we are engaging in conversation with, it's part of why Twitter can go from 0 to 100 real quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone who uses Twitter, Janet, perhaps might recognise that,
Absolutely.
Why is that, do you think? There's that mentality of you can get pretty angry on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you can, but I've also seen enormous kindness on Twitter and some really informative stuff on Twitter and people who are very giving on Twitter. You've got to pick your mark, though. So I'm a relentless stalker who sits on the sidelines and just watches and waits.
Oh, you don't tend to weigh in too much, do you?
No, never. Well, why?
Why?
Pourquoi?
Just don't be afraid to block, people. Don't be afraid to block.
Thank you, James.
Very good indeed. Janet Wilson, James Nukesa, you've been wonderful. Thank you very much for being with us. I'm back tomorrow from 3:45. Checkpoint now.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, a tornado whips through Coopers Beach in Northland, gobbling up roofs and ripping up a shed. Other parts of the country take a battering too. What does it take to get into a state house these days? More than 11,000 people are backed up on the waiting list. Does 6 people in a one-bedroom unit, including a baby with serious health problems, get you through the front door? Let's find out. 2 nurses in Samoa admit injecting babies who later died with the wrong cocktail of vaccine. The quarter-acre section turned mega salad selection. Is this the good life in Taranaki? And there's rogue rabbits running rampant in Roxburgh. Radical. Let us go to the news.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. Civil Defence is astonished that no one was injured by the tornado that hit Coopers Beach in the far north this morning. The twister struck about 10:30, leaving a trail of damaged roofs, smashed windows and flattened fences in its wake. Civil Defence leader Colin Kitchen says many people would have been out at work when the twister hit, but others had a close shave.
I know one person, they were in their conservatory at the time and the whole conservatory taken off, but it just went from around them. One elderly guy, but he's a bit shaken up.
Colin Kitchen says the elderly man's conservatory ended up metres away, smashed against a fence. And Wellington is expected to be hit with gale force winds this evening. Tornadoes, lightning and torrential rain have buffeted areas of the North Island today, while parts of the South Island struggled to get above 0 degrees. Met Service meteorologist Peter Little says Wellingtonians may need to batten down the hatches.
People in Wellington at the moment, it's a bit wet, not much wind though, but certainly that'll change by the time for the afternoon commute. As an area of low pressure crosses the North Island, we're going to see southerly winds rise to severe gale, gusting 120 k's in exposed places.
Peter Little from Met Service. And some domestic flights in and out of Wellington have been delayed this afternoon due to bad weather and strong winds. However, Air New Zealand says it's not had to cancel any flights. Cook Strait ferry sailings have not been affected, but Metlink says the Cross Harbour commuter ferry will be operating to a restricted timetable. National is calling for the Treasury Secretary Gabriel McLoof to be stood down while he's being investigated over his handling of the breach of budget details. The State Services Commission is looking into Mr McLoof's claim Treasury's website had been hacked, the advice he gave the Finance Minister and his decision to contact the police. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more.
National Deputy Leader Paula Bennett says it's extraordinary Mr McLoof is continuing to work, while serious questions about whether he misled the government and New Zealanders are being investigated. She says neither the Prime Minister nor the Finance Minister are able to express confidence in Mr McLoof, and he should be offering to stand down. But the State Services Commissioner, Peter Hughes, says while there are reasons why people are sometimes stood down during an investigation, in his view, this is not one of those situations. From Parliament, Yvette McCullough.
The Mayor of Taupō is backing reducing speed limits to 80 kilometres an hour on rural highways and roads. The region has been hit with multiple fatalities, including a family of 5 and 8 people killed just 10 days apart. The transport agency tool Mega Maps suggests that most 100 kilometre an hour roads should be limited to 80 or even 60 on some roads. David Truevis says he would personally support a limit of 80.
When you see, dare I say, body bags lined up and the emergency services, what they have to deal with, anything that can help, anything that can get through to people, that you must reduce your speed.
David Truevis. Dunedin is at risk from a similar size earthquake to the magnitude 7.8 quake that struck Kaikoura in 2016. New research using kelp has revealed an ancient genetic footprint which shows a similar size quake hit southern New Zealand about 1,000 years ago. Scientists from the University of Otago say the prehistoric rupture of the Akatore Fault just south of Dunedin uplifted a large stretch of the southeastern coast by 2 to 3 metres. The Marsden-funded research team combined geological and genetic data to assess the impacts of the ancient quake. Professor John Waters says the results are a breakthrough.
For us, it's a new way to look at what's happened in the past, and there's a good geological record that there was uplift in this area, so there's a strong record, and the landscape shows that.
Professor Waters says the Akatore Fault remains a bigger threat to Dunedin than the Alpine Fault, which runs the length of the South Island. The country's largest emergency hostel has reopened in Auckland after a multi-million-dollar refurbishment. The renovation was the first for the James Liston Hostel since it was built in the 1970s. The $5 million refurbishment increases the hostel's capacity by 7 to a total of 52 beds. It includes central heating, new bathrooms, improved security and a separate wing for women. The High Court has ruled that Wellington City Council's consultation processes over a controversial cycleway in Island Bay met its legal obligations. Last month, the Island Bay Residents Association sought a review of the way the cycleway was implemented, with its lawyer describing the City Council's decision-making as slipshod. In a just-released decision, Justice Churchman has rejected the association's case and dismissed the application for a judicial review. It's 5:05. Telling Christchurch it wouldn't get to host any World Cup matches was the toughest thing outgoing New Zealand rugby boss Steve Tew had to do during his time in the job. Tew has today announced he's stepping down as Chief Executive of New Zealand Rugby at the end of the year. Reflecting on his past 12 years in the role, Tew says the Christchurch earthquakes meant the city simply didn't have the facilities to host World Cup matches when the 2011 tournament was played here.
The day we had to tell the Mayor in the first instance and then the Canterbury public what they knew was a matter of fact, and that was that they couldn't host a World Cup in that city after the earthquakes. But that moment was very difficult. It was probably the hardest. It wasn't the hardest decision to make because it was the most obvious, but it was a very difficult decision to relay.
Steve Tew. The Black Caps and Canterbury batsman Tom Latham says it'll mean a lot to meet up with the Bangladesh team in tonight's Cricket World Cup clash in London. The match will be the first between the sides since Bangladesh's tour here was shortened in March following the Christchurch mosque shootings. The Bangladesh side was on its way to one of the mosques when the attacks happened and quickly left the country, meaning the Black Caps never got to farewell them, says Latham.
Obviously last time Bangladesh were in our country, it was obviously wasn't ideal. It will be great to see them. Obviously left pretty quickly from what happened, so I'm sure both sides are looking forward to getting out there and I guess getting back to the cricket field around what we love doing.
Tom Latham. And in tonight's other World Cup match, India play South Africa. And that's the news.
Trimming the speed limit.
We're a country that we're long and thin. We do rely on roads.
Raining on the budget parade.
I didn't come down in the last garden shower. The Minister of Finance is a wily political operator.
And voting in Auckland.
It's ridiculous. It's not a matter of left or right. It's a matter of experience and judgment.
Rely on us. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Corin Dan. Weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, should glassy high-rise developments become a no-no on energy efficiency grounds? And after 10, the entrepreneurs teaching the next generation of Māori community and business leaders. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. For Northland, showers developing this afternoon, some heavy with possible thunderstorms easing this evening. Rain late tomorrow. A change to gale southwesterlies this evening. Auckland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taumaranui and Taupo. Rain with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms easing this afternoon and evening. A few showers tomorrow, turning to rain in the evening. Strong or gale northerlies, changing strong to gale southwest this evening. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, occasional rain, possibly heavy, clearing for a time tomorrow. Gale southwesterlies about the coast tonight, easing tomorrow. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Wairakapa upper. Periods of rain today, possibly heavy. A few showers tomorrow, then evening rain. Southerlies strengthening, gusting severe gale in Wellington, and then easing overnight. For Marlborough and Nelson, rain clearing this evening, then mainly fine. Gales, southerlies about coastal Marlborough, easing overnight. Buller and Western, fine today. Rain tomorrow, possibly heavy, clearing in Westland later. For Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine, the odd shower tomorrow. For Southland and Fiordland, scattered showers, sometimes heavy with hail. And for the Chatham Islands, rain developing this evening, clearing later tomorrow. RNZ National, it is 5:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Thank you, Anna. It's like a mini war zone. That's how they're describing the scene at Coopers Beach in the far north, where a brief but violent tornado struck this morning. It's left more than a dozen homes damaged and Civil Defence marvelling that no one was seriously hurt. Lois Williams reports.
The twister struck about 10:30 as an ominous dark front moved in over Doubtless Bay. A Coopers Beach resident, John Hart, says the skies turned so black he had to turn the lights on. Horizontal rain battered the windows and the wind was suddenly deafening.
At that moment, I saw a table fly past about perhaps 100 feet off the ground, maybe more, with its legs stuck up in the air, just going at breakneck speed through the sky. and then a very large trampoline thumped down onto the road just 100 metres away. So, yeah, it was quite exciting for a few minutes there.
But Civil Defence leader Colin Kitchen says it was a bit too exciting for one elderly man further up the hill who was quietly watching the storm when he suddenly found himself sitting outdoors.
I know one person, they were in their conservatory at the time, and the whole conservatory taken off, but it just went from around them. One elderly guy, but he's a bit shaken up.
The conservatory ended up metres away, smashed against a fence. And a woman who's sorting out the mess for a friend whose house was hit says it's just as well she was out this morning with her children.
The front windows are totally blown in, and in fact they've had a post by the looks of it come through their lounge door into their wall, which is all rather exciting, and we're just happy that nobody was home. Ashley's pregnant and 2 little kids. So it's just everybody rallying in to help clean up, make sure they've got somewhere to go tonight, and just making sure anything that's loose is kind of boarded down.
Colin Kitchen says most of the homes hit by the tornado are in Torsby Road on the hill above Cooper's Beach. Civil Defence is mapping and recording the damage, while local builders and fire and emergency staff have been mucking in this afternoon to repair as much as they can before dark. But at least 3 homes are too badly damaged for their occupants to return to tonight.
It's sort of like a mini war zone up here at the moment. There's roofs off, there's roller doors gone, there's windows gone, there's trampolines all over the place, there's fences gone. Yeah, so it's quite a bit of destruction here.
It's not the first time Cooper's Beach has been hit by a tornado. A twister hit about 100 metres away about 15 years ago, and it followed a similar path over the bay, across the highway and up the hill. Mr Kitchen says the scenic location of the little community is what makes it vulnerable.
You know, the wind coming from the northeast, and there's quite a funnel through Bergen's Point and Kerry Peninsula. It's funnels. It comes right across into the Doubtless Bay and then up the hill and away.
And while Cooper's Beach residents are picking up the pieces, Niwa says they should keep a weather eye out. The patterns that created the tornado are continuing, and today's twister might not be the last this week. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
And the far north wasn't the only part of the country to be buffeted by wild weather today. Hundreds of lightning strikes, gale-force winds, torrential rain and freezing temperatures have hammered the country today. And while the worst of the weather has been in Northland and Auckland, forecasters are warning Wellingtonians to batten down the hatches as it moves across the capital. Matthew Tunison has been storm chasing today.
Thunder rattled windows and set off car alarms in central Auckland today. Met Service meteorologist Peter Little says the fast-moving front dramatically darkened the skies in the north, then lit them up with hundreds of lightning strikes.
Very active with thunderstorms, so a lot of thunder, lightning, and again also risk of strong wind gusts and tornadoes, along with the very heavy rain. So at around about 1:15, there was 91 lightning strikes that occurred over the Auckland area and 219 over Northland, and that's over the land area as well.
It's been a bit of a dreary day in Wellington, but Mr Little says the capital won't be spared, with gale-force winds expected from about 4 p.m.
People in Wellington at the moment, it's a bit wet, not much wind though, but certainly that'll change by the time for the afternoon commute. As an area of low pressure crosses the North Island, we're going to see southerly winds rise to severe gale, gusting 120 k's in exposed places.
As well as the Cooper's Beach tornado, which damaged at least 12 properties, what's been described as a mini tornado tore up a shed in Kaiwaka in Northland this afternoon. Fire and Emergency Communications Advisor Andrew Morrison says it's been just one of numerous jobs that have kept emergency services busy today.
We had a report of a shed with its contents scattered around the place, so we were assisting with that resident in Kaiwaka.
Surface flooding also caused delays on State Highway 1 on Auckland's North Shore as a result of the deluge. Traffic slowed to a crawl when a lane was closed, but the flooding has since receded and the lane reopened in time for the afternoon commute. Air New Zealand, though, is warning travellers flying in or out of Wellington this afternoon to keep a close eye on their flight status, as the wind could cause delays. In Christchurch, meanwhile, much of the city didn't get above 2 degrees until after midday. The system that brought this wild weather is moving rapidly and will have largely dissipated by the morning. However, more rain is expected for the South Island tomorrow, although it won't be as intense. In Auckland for Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunis and Tēnei.
It's 5:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let us know if you were in the eye of the storm there, if you saw the tornado, or flick us some of the pictures that you may have taken. A Mangere social worker says the wait for state housing is putting young lives at risk, with a Mangere family of 6, including a sick baby, jammed into a one-bedroom private rental, despite medical advice saying it is unsuitable. That family and more than 11,000 others are on the waiting list for a state house. The father, a full-time forklift driver, has had his overtime hours cut, so the family is struggling even harder to pay for their private rental and put food on the table. Their youngest child recently had meningitis, prompting a doctor at Middlemore Hospital to write a letter saying their overcrowded conditions were putting the baby's recovery at risk. But the family says despite providing all this information to the Ministry of Social Development, they're still waiting. An old-school lullaby is what's needed to soothe the grumbly baby of this Mangere family to sleep. His parents, though, are kept awake at night by the weight of waiting. More than 4 years so far for a state house.
We really want to tell them we really need a house. We just only have one bedroom in our house.
And how many of you live here?
6 of us live here.
So where does everybody sleep?
2 of us, me and the baby in the room, and the little one, the third one inside the room, and my husband and the 2 boys inside here.
Your husband and your 2 sons sleep in the lounge?
Yeah, in the lounge.
A house? Maybe not. It is a modest unit in Mangere, no more than 60 metres square. A bed's pushed up against the wall in the lounge. It doubles as seating during the day. The sole bedroom has a double and a single pushed up against the wall too. The family's toys are neatly bagged, boxed and stacked to maximise space. If you're wondering, this place is twinkling clean too. A private rental, it costs $365 a week.
I try my best to warm it up, but it's still cold in here.
Do you use the heater?
Yes, I have to, because it's just to warm up the house because of the kids.
What does that mean for your power bill?
Another bill, bell, too much bell. I worry about the bell too, so sometimes I, just turn it off because it's too much power.
They're not getting an accommodation supplement and there's no winter energy payment for them because this is a working family. They do get a weekly family tax credit of $244. Her husband works full-time as a forklift driver, bringing in about $44,000 before tax for just over 40 hours a week. He's been keeping the family financially afloat by churning out up to 20 hours a week overtime, bringing the household income up to about $70,000. While we're talking, her husband arrives home from an early start.
I normally set up my alarm before 4 o'clock in the morning.
And who is sleeping in the lounge with you?
Me and my 3 boys sleep outside here. So now the winter's coming, start cold, and everyone wants to sleep together to get warm.
So when the alarm goes off at 4 in the morning for you to go to work,
yes,
your boys wake up?
Everyone's wake up.
How old are your boys?
My older one's 5 years old. My second one, 3 years old. My third one, 2 years old. And my 4 months baby.
So everybody wakes up at 4 a.m?
Yes. And when I get to work before 5 o'clock, I ring my partner to check my boys if they go back to sleep, and she say no, they still awake. We nearly 4 years we stay in this private house. We applying for house in New Zealand, more than 4 years. Before we moved here, we stayed at the boarding house. So we're moving here. We're still waiting for our application at the house in New Zealand. We're still on the top on the waiting list. Every time we call them, they give us a same answer every week.
And what's the answer? No house?
They always told us, don't worry, your application being updated. Someone will call you when any house available.
What you can't see, because he doesn't want his face shown, are the tears he is desperately fighting back.
It looks like they not care about my kids and my family. And they always told us to go looking for a private house. We can afford to pay the rents, the private house.
You're struggling to pay the rent on this private house?
Yes. Because my works, they cut down the OTs. So now I pay my normal hours every week now. So.
How many overtime hours did you used to work in a week?
Depend. If they want me to stay to work overtime, I stay. If they no OT, I finish at 1:30. That's my 8 hours every day.
But you needed the overtime?
Yes, I always need the overtime to make sure my financials every week, some money to feed my kids and my family.
And without the overtime, how hard is that?
It's very hard to. It's very hard to.
A letter from his employer confirms there's a freeze on overtime hours, meaning he's lost about $25,000 of income over a year. The family's had independent budgeting advice. There's a spreadsheet with rows and rows of figures accounting for everything from power and car payments to nappies. The number that matters the most, though, is the one with a negative in front of it at the bottom of the page. Social worker Alistair Russell is from the Mangere East Family Service Centre.
Based on the overtime income of $70,000 per annum, that's 60 hours per week, there was still $40 a week in deficit. This is a family that is living week by week with no prospect of saving, and the ability to move into more suitable private housing is just not real.
While we talk, Mum soothes her youngest. He's a little grizzly from an earache and a chest infection that's almost cleared. A food survey estimates basic food costs of more than $260 a week for a family of this size. They are spending just $200, and that includes the likes of nappies and special toiletries for one of the older boys.
He's got the eczema and the asthma. He's not allowed to eat some of the food that we're trying to stop him from that one, and even some of the clothes and the things that we are using in the house. Even for the puff, he's not allowed for using some of the soaps.
The children's medicine sits beside the sink. Recent correspondence from MSD says the family's income and medical issues have already been taken into account when it comes to their wait list rating. And a housing escalation team has reviewed the case. Still no movement. Alistair Russell again.
This family is doing everything it can to support themselves and to look after their kids. And all they need is a break and a house so that their kids can live a life with dignity and hope for the future. That has been denied them, and whilst that goes on, these children are an ongoing risk of serious illness. Tragedies could occur in this situation if nothing is done. The family's well-being should be paramount, the children's well-being should be paramount. The government and Jacinda Ardern says that child poverty is at the top of their agenda. Where is the evidence of that?
For this dad, there is no space for politics. His mind is full of numbers, with a small corner reserved for hope.
Sometimes my partner rings me to come home. I told you, I can't come home. I don't want my kids to struggle. I don't want them to stay with no food.
How much do you worry about putting food on the table and paying the power bill and paying the rent? How much do you worry?
I'm so worried about every week I could pay. I always sit down at work and make my budget. What money going for my rent and my bills, and the leftovers buy my kids food. I feel happy. If we get the house from the house in New Zealand, make me happy, because I want my kids to stay healthy, happy every day.
What do you want for your family? What would you like?
I want my kids being happy.
Now, Checkpoint started asking the Ministry of Social Development about this family's situation last week. Today, MSD called them to say that their waiting list priority rating has gone up 2 notches from A14 to A16. Now, to put that in context, the highest rating is A20. MSD says it reassessed the couple's application since we got involved and realised that it had overlooked a letter from the Manukau DHB about the couple's current accommodation affecting the children's health. The Ministry's Regional Commissioner, Mark Goldsmith, says, "We're sorry for this." Mr Goldsmith says, unfortunately, demand for public housing continues to outstrip supply, and how much a family can afford to pay for housing is a key component in assessing a household's priority rating. MSD says the couple first applied for the State House waiting list in 2015, but their case was closed off because more information was required, and in June 2017 they reapplied. Also, the social worker that you saw in our piece says the family were contacted today by MSD following a reassessment and were told that they should be eligible for an accommodation support of about $120 a week. Now, to put all of this in perspective, as at March this year, there were 11,067 people or households on the waiting list for state or so-called public housing. The numbers waiting have doubled in the last 2 years. 81% of those people are priority A applicants, meaning that they are at risk and have a severe and persistent housing need that must be addressed immediately. Meanwhile, Housing Minister Phil Twyford says the government will exceed its state house building target in the year ending June.
We always want to do more, but we've said since the time we formed the government that this situation would get worse before it got better. You know, the census before the most recent one estimated that there were more than 40,000 people homeless and living in severe housing stress. These people are coming forward now because there's a government that says that if they aren't properly housed, we will put a roof over their heads. We're investing at the moment more than $4 billion building an extra 6,500 state and community houses, and we're making pretty good progress on that. So this current year, I fully expect we will exceed our target of 1,600 net additional public houses. So we're going as fast as we can. But, you know, having said that, the single most important thing we can do to reduce homelessness is to build more public housing, and that's why we've made it a top priority.
And that's Housing Minister Phil Twyford there. If you want to look back at that story, it'll go up on our Facebook page. It was filmed by Nick Munro. Already we're getting feedback from you. Let's just get to a little bit of it. Mike says that's just too tough. A hard-working couple on the back foot. It's not fair at all. They need more support. Jackie says, hang your head in shame, John Key. Look at what you have left for others to fix up. Heartbreaking story about a family struggling to find a decent home. Scott, on the other hand, says, where is the sense of responsibility? Bringing 4 children into the world without a plan to shelter, feed and clothe them is plainly irresponsible. It's not up to society to look after the fact that they have no plan. Barbara says there needs to be serious discussion about families having numerous children when they're in dire straits and cannot afford them. Keep your feedback coming. on Checkpoint on RNZ National, why police have raided the headquarters of Australia's national public broadcaster, and should speed limits be cut on dangerous open roads, or will that put the brakes on the economy? And rugby boss Steve Tew on why he's hanging up his boots. And the new Plymouth couple channeling suburban self-sufficiency. As always, we'd love to hear from you about anything you've seen on the program today. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now with Anna.
Thanks, Lisa. The north of the country has been struck by tornadoes, lightning, torrential rain and gale force winds as a severe weather front moves down the country. A fire service spokesperson says they've had many reports of fire alarms being activated, surface flooding and power lines arcing in Northland and Auckland. At Coopers Beach in the far north, up to 12 houses were damaged when a tornado lifted roofs and damaged properties, including ripping the conservatory of a house. The National Party is calling for the Treasury Secretary to be stood down pending an investigation into his handling of the breach of budget details. The State Services Commission is looking into Gabriel McLouf's claim that the Treasury website had been hacked, what advice he gave the Finance Minister and his decision to contact police. But the State Services Commissioner Peter Hughes says while there are sometimes reasons for standing people down during an investigation, this is not one of those situations. Taupō's mayor is backing lowering speed limits to 80 kilometres an hour on some rural highways and roads. There have been multiple road deaths in the region, including 2 families, one of 8 and one of 5, who were killed within a 10-day period. The Transport Agency has suggested most 100 kilometre an hour roads should be reduced to 80 or even 60 in some areas. The High Court has ruled that Wellington City Council's consultation process over a controversial Island Bay cycleway met its legal obligations. Last month, the Island Bay Residents Association sought a review of the way the cycleway was implemented, with its lawyer describing the City Council's decision-making as slipshod. In a decision released a short time ago, Justice Churchman rejects the association's case and has dismissed the application for a judicial review. A boy has been taken to hospital in Invercargill after being impaled through his leg at Thornbury School in Southland this afternoon. The fire service helped to move the boy, and a St John ambulance spokesperson says he's been taken to Kew Hospital with moderate injuries. And those are the headlines.
Thanks, Anna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's go to business now with Nona Pelsier. Nona, so I hear car registrations are down. What's going on?
Interesting, yeah. People stopped. They slowed down their purchases of luxury vehicles about 18 months ago. And that gave a warning to the industry that maybe things were turning. And so late last year and early this year and right into last month, the number of vehicle registrations has dropped significantly. We're talking about 14%. And 13.5% actually, that's overall. But for passenger vehicles, we're down like about 18%. And for commercial vehicles, about 5%, and that's on the year earlier. So,
is it only the posh cars?
No, people are buying a lot fewer sedans, hatchbacks, and station wagons, and now SUVs are also starting to become affected by this. So the industry is expecting the downturn to continue for a little while longer, in line with economic growth, which has slowed somewhat. And when I said, what will be the sign that things are turning around? When people start buying those luxury cars again.
Oh, maybe a bus pass.
I'm not going to buy a luxury car. Don't count on me.
Okay, bus pass then for you.
Yeah.
Farmers are finding it difficult to get some credit. Why is it posing a problem at the moment?
Farmers are like one of the riskiest groups anyway. And at the moment, with credit being a concern with the government, the Reserve Bank looking at proposing to raise the capital requirements. That's the amount of money that banks must hold in reserve. If they go ahead with the maximum amount, it could cost, the economy quite a lot. It certainly would rein in the lending, and especially for high-risk customers like farmers. So farmers are sort of suggesting that it's a problem. Small banks like SBS are also saying, look, we already are cutting back on lending to farmers. So it's happening now. And of course, so interest rates are low. but that doesn't mean it's easy to get a loan. And that's not just for farmers, it's anyone who poses a high credit risk.
What else has been happening on the markets today?
Well, keeping with interest rates, interestingly, last week, we only just learned this today because the speech was released. The Assistant Governor, Christian Hawkesby, he gave a speech to the Bank of Japan in a panel discussion, and that speech was just released this afternoon, where he said that that interest rates will remain broadly around current levels for the foreseeable future. And that really gave the Kiwi dollar a boost. And so we finished pretty strong. 66.3 US cents, 94.8 Australian, and 52.2 pence. So it's been a while since we had been at those rates. I mean, just like, say, Friday, we were around, 65 cents? So it's a big move up since then. And our top 50 index, I'm sorry to say, it didn't end in the 10,000s like I hoped to tell you about today. But we did reach an intraday high of 10,034 before falling back a little bit. Still in positive territory, 4 points up to 9,956.
So it had a little bit of a bounce back from yesterday's moves, but not over the 10.
Quite a good one. Yeah, so that's the closing number there is 9,956.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Palcier with our business update. Is the speed limit on some of our open roads too high? A transport agency tool, Mega Maps, has found the speed limit on 87% of roads is higher than what is deemed the safe travel speed. It suggests that speed should be as low as 60 on some open roads and 30 or 40 kilometres per hour in cities. And local community leaders are on board with that idea, despite claims that it could put the brakes on the economy. Mediana Johnson reports.
Taupō has been one of the worst hit regions this year, with multiple road fatalities within days of each other. Its Mayor David Trewavis says he would welcome speed limits of 80 kilometres an hour on rural roads.
When you see, dare I say, body bags lined up and the emergency services, what they have to deal with, anything that can help, anything that can get through to people, that you must reduce your speed.
However, the National Party says near universal reductions of the speed limit would impact the economy. Its transport spokesperson, Paul Goldsmith, says the economy relies on the movement of freight, so any slowing of speeds could cost the country.
Having a strong, productive economy enables us to invest in health in many other areas, which helps improve the quality of life and well-being of New Zealanders. And so before you make dramatic changes, speed limits right across the board, you have to think these things very carefully through.
The government has given no indication of whether it will reduce all speed limits and rejects claims a slower network will make it less efficient. Associate Minister of Transport Julianne Genter says high-speed crashes can also cause delays.
We don't have more efficient roads when we have lots of fatal crashes on our roads. That slows down traffic as well. So the idea that traveling at 10 kilometres an hour faster, 20 kilometres an hour faster on narrow, dangerous, windy roads is somehow better for the economy is just completely ridiculous.
Cities across the country are already reducing or looking to reduce speed limits. Auckland has just finished consultation on dropping inner-city speed limits to 30 kilometres an hour, and Wellington City Council is looking to do the same. But Hamilton has taken the lead and already cut its inner-city speed limits to 30 kilometres an hour. Its Mayor Andrew King says that has made a huge difference to the number of pedestrian accidents.
We know that they're around about half, so car to pedestrian crashes have roughly fallen by half. So this is a marked movement down, and it certainly justifies where we're doing, what we're doing and where we're going.
In the South Island, Mega Maps suggests the safe speed between Nelson and Picton, a 100 kilometre per hour road important for transporting freight, is between 60 and 80 kilometres an hour. RNZ spoke to people in Nelson who drive that route, and while most are opposed to the idea of a lowered speed limit, there was some support.
100% agree.
Why is that?
Because I'm a shit driver and it's scary, so I go that fast anyway.
I do drive that road a bit, and I haven't struck any problems in the past, so you can't really see any issues with keeping it the same as it is.
I think there's sections that 100k is absolutely fine, so definitely some areas you could drop the speed limit, but not the lot.
I did before I lost my licence, but it would be ridiculous. I've driven it a few times. I don't enjoy when you get stuck behind someone slow.
A new road safety strategy from 2020 onwards is due to be put out for public consultation, which may include lowering limits on some high-risk roads. For Checkpoint, Cormediana Johnson Tierney.
It's about 20 minutes away from 6. I know you're going to have an opinion on that story. Let us know what you think. Would you be happy to drive at 60 k's on a number of our open roads, 30 to 40 kilometres in the city? What do you reckon? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Donald Trump has said the US and UK have the greatest alliance the world has ever known. In a news conference with British Prime Minister Theresa May, he promised a phenomenal trade deal after the UK leaves the European Union, but added that everything is on the table, including the NHS. Mr Trump is on the second day of his state visit to the UK, which sparked street protests in London today, dismissed by the President as fake news. The BBC's political editor, Laura Koonsberg, reports.
When the President comes to town, controversy is never far. The Prime Minister was his first international guest at the White House. This Kodak moment for the Mays and the Trumps will be one of her last. A press conference with Donald Trump on a momentous occasion, a grand leaving do for Theresa May. Clear even from the niceties, the two have sometimes clashed.
I've always talked openly with you, Donald, when we have taken a different approach, and you've done the same with me. I've always believed that cooperation and compromise are the basis of strong alliances, and nowhere is this more true than in the special relationship.
For any British and American pair, this relationship matters, but nothing ever knowingly undersold by Donald Trump.
Prime Minister May, it's been a true honor. I have greatly enjoyed working with you. You are a tremendous professional and a person that loves your country dearly. Thank you very much. Really an honor. The American and the British people, it's the greatest alliance the world has ever known. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you.
As the UK stumbles towards leaving the EU, the President has questioned the Prime Minister's approach.
I seem to remember the President suggested that I sued the European Union, which we didn't do. We went into negotiations and we came out with a good deal.
That's not such a... I would have sued, but that's okay. I would have sued and settled, maybe, but you never know. She's probably a better negotiator than I am. I think we're going to have a great trade deal, yes. I think we're going to have a great and very comprehensive trade deal. When you're dealing on trade, everything's on the table.
These protests weren't fake news, as the President claimed, although there were pockets of support for him, and the crowd's much smaller than last time. Leading the charge, though, the Labour leader, who refused last night to go to the Queen's dinner in honour of Donald Trump.
Together we can make a big difference. Together we can change this world. Together we can bring about that peace and justice. And by our demonstration here today, we've shown just how determined we, all of us, are to achieve that better place and that better world.
But then it emerged from the President's lips. Mr Corbyn had asked to see him after all.
I don't know Jeremy Corbyn. Never met him, never spoke to him. He wanted to meet today or tomorrow, and I decided that I would not do that. I think that he is, from where I come from, somewhat of a negative force.
Theresa May and Donald Trump are very different characters, very different leaders. And even the careful choreography of a state visit like this can't mask the fractures and the difficulties between the United States and the United Kingdom. But this, of course, is a relationship that will matter for longer and will last longer than two occupants will stay in office.
It's almost 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Getting some feedback from our control room, actually, about whether we should lower the speed limit on the open road. Calvin, our director, has done a rough calculation. He says Auckland to Hamilton at 100 k's an hour takes you about an hour 15. He says if you drop that speed limit to 60, it will take you 2 hours and 5 minutes. And he reckons that might cause more accidents because of impatience. Now, if Calvin has pushed the wrong buttons on the calculator and got those numbers wrong, email him, not me. And you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz because we're interested in what you think too. As people in Darwin continue to come to grips with the shooting rampage that left 4 people dead overnight, the attention is now turning to why it happened and whether it could have been prevented. The alleged gunman has now been identified as Ben Hoffman, a 45-year-old man who police say was on parole and wearing an electronic monitoring bracelet. After these details emerged, the Northern Territory's Chief Minister has ordered an immediate review of everybody else on parole and under monitoring. The ABC's Amelia Tew reports.
It's quiet and peaceful outside a motel near Darwin City today, hiding the horror of what happened here last night. Leah Potter was there.
And we heard the gunshots, but we thought it was fireworks. And then a man came running up the footpath with a woman in his arms saying she's been shot. We ran into my motel room and got some towels, wrapped her legs up. We put her in the back of a police vehicle in case the gunman came back.
Police say the gunman then drove to a nearby home, then a pub, then another residential house on a quiet street. It's there that a neighbour, Peter Bowden, says he called police and then when he went in to investigate himself, made a discovery.
And then I have to walk in on top of a body that's been shot 4 or 5 times with a shotgun.
In total, 4 people were killed as the alleged gunman drove from location to location before he was tasered by authorities on the corner of a highway. That alleged gunman has today been identified as 45-year-old Benjamin Hoffman. He's a local man known to witness Leah Potter.
People my age, we all knocked around together. You know, people knew each other. We all knew each other, and we all knew Ben. I don't think people are really hugely surprised, but just really shocked and saddened.
Commissioner for Corrections Scott McNahon confirmed the alleged gunman was on parole.
He was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment with a non-parole period of 4 years. The parole board is an independent and statutory body. He was released to parole in January 2019. He was released to parole with 23 strict conditions as part of his parole.
Police have also confirmed he was wearing an electronic monitoring bracelet to track his movements. The NT Chief Minister, Michael Gunner, says there'll be an immediate review.
Police will have an independent review of the incident and details will be advised later. We have asked for a detailed report from the parole board on the alleged offender. We have directed an immediate review of everyone on parole.
Outside the motel, Leah Potter says the town is coming to grips with what happened, and she spent last night with many others trying to figure this out at a local restaurant.
We've been talking a lot, you know. We all gathered at Uncle Sam's last night, people that knew the victims, people that had witnessed things, people that knew the alleged gunman, taxi drivers, stuff like that. We all gathered at Uncle Sam's and we were there until all hours of the morning, just piecing together what had happened and sharing stories and supporting each other like Territorians do. No one can really believe that this happened, you know.
And that was shooting witness Leah Potter, ending that report from the ABC's Amelia Tew. Departing New Zealand rugby boss Steve Tew says at times he's felt personally let down by players, but he thinks the organisation has greatly improved its attitude towards women. Tew will step down as CEO at the end of the year after a 25-year involvement with the game. He played a large role in securing the hosting rights for the 2011 World Cup, has overseen World Cups for the All Blacks and Black Ferns, and has helped convince the best players to stay in the face of increasing pressure from cash-rich overseas clubs. Tew was at the helm when several off-field incidents led to NZR commissioning a respect and responsibility review in 2016, following criticism about players harassing and behaving violently towards women. He spoke to RNZ's rugby reporter Joe Porter about the ups and downs in the job.
I'm really proud of winning a large number of world trophies across both men's and women's and 15s and 7s. Every moment that you see a New Zealand team on the top of the world, that is something pretty special. But I'm equally proud when we say we've got a safer game than we had 10 years ago.
What's been the most difficult or challenging issue you've faced in your time?
Again, as I said before, I think the earthquakes in Christchurch and having to move a significant chunk of Rugby World Cup was disruptive to running the tournament for sure, but it was just heartbreaking for those communities. So, but again, I'm incredibly proud that rugby played its part in the rebuild, because the Crusaders that year were a beacon. They were something that, and I talk about this a lot overseas, if you want to see what sport can do to inspire and unify, then World Cup in 2011 was a great moment. We won, everyone got obviously inspired and unified. But in Christchurch, earlier that year, the Crusaders just kept that community going through 10,000 aftershocks.
The incidents that led to the Respect and Responsibility Review, that period, did you find that personally affecting at all?
Oh, well, it was disappointing for all of us, because the game was getting dragged, if you like, through some pretty untidy headlines. And some of the analysis of that was fair, and some of it was a little bit over the top. But there's no point in dwelling on that. What we said was we could say that the players' behaviour just reflects New Zealand, and therefore we just got to accept that, and that's our bit. Or we can do it as we did. We can say, okay, we probably can do better than we are. Let's get a group in to have a look at that, give us some advice. And they gave us about 70 recommendations, and we're busy modifying some of them, but largely putting them into place. And as I've said a lot since that time, that will be the thing that defines our game, I think, over decades, is that we will be able to have helped this country tackle some of the things which we shouldn't be so proud about.
When some of that less than noble behaviour reflects on NZR and ultimately you, does it hurt at all personally?
Well, I mean, you can say no, can't you? But you're not telling the truth. I mean, the reality is, when you are the face of an organisation that has been criticised, and particularly criticised for things as, I guess, so sort of deep as violence, domestic violence, lack of respect, homophobia, then you take those things seriously. But there has to be a point where you can draw a line and say, well, actually, I know what I am, I know my values, and I know the kind of culture I've created around my own life, and you just go back to that. But you've got to get on and do something about it, and we did.
Player retention, the ever, I guess, evolving battle. You guys have done remarkably well in keeping the top players, well, most of the top players here over the last decade. Is it a battle that you can win, or will it get harder and harder to win this fight?
Well, we have to win it, and whoever sits in my seat will have an able group of people that have got a lot of experience in here in doing just that. Our contracted group and the relationships we have with some key player representatives. I'd mention Warren Alcock as one down in Dunedin, who's a very unsung hero in this regard, because he's advised a number of our leading players who have been catalysts for keeping a broader group. So when you keep Richie and Dan, we kept a whole lot of that generation. When we kept Sam and Kieran, we kept a whole lot of that generation. It was great that Sam Whitelock recommitted, because that's going to help with this current bunch, and we're well advanced on some good discussions with other players. So yeah, lots of people help in that regard, but it's getting harder, but it was never easy.
The strength and the growth in the women's game, and obviously wanting to continue that momentum, how important is it to recognise what's going on in New Zealand with a fully professional women's competition, and how far away do you think that is?
We said for some time now that what we want to do is to have an organic development of the women's game, so we want there to be an appropriate infrastructure in behind any future competition, and so that competition is still a year or two away, and the shape of it's not yet been decided. But in the meantime, we've invested quite heavily at provincial union level around academies and personnel to develop better athletes. And so, as I say, we're trying to. But there are some lessons from some of the other sports that have jumped quickly to a league and not necessarily had the investment underneath to sustain it.
And Pacific Rugby, do you feel New Zealand Rugby has an obligation or a moral obligation or ethical obligation to help protect the game and promote the game in the Pacific and grow the game there? And I guess, be a little bit of a protector or a knight for the Pacific in that sense.
Well, there's two answers to that question. One is New Zealand is located in the Pacific, and therefore New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand generally has a deep responsibility to ensure that we do all we can for our Pacifica neighbours, not just in sport, education, trade, welfare, medical stuff. And when there's a disaster, which often afflicts islands. In New Zealand, I mean, there is no doubt. You only have to look at the panels around here that the Pacific culture is ingrained in our jerseys. The Black Ferns and the All Black jerseys are deeper, and their legacy is deeper for the influence we've had from Pacifica. But a lot of that Pacifica now, of course, is second or third generation New Zealander. But we certainly take our role seriously around the World Rugby table. We've advocated for change of governance, which has now seen Fiji and Samoa join the council table. We've advocated strongly for any new competition to take a serious look at all Tier 2 countries. And at the moment, that is one of the big issues around this new comp, is that where does promotion and relegation sit? And it's not just actually about Fiji and Samoa, but it's also about Romania, Georgia and other developing countries. We've always tried to take a broader leadership role, while at the end also making sure that what's right for New Zealand is also taken into account.
And that's Steve Tew, the outgoing boss of New Zealand Rugby. He was speaking to Joe Porter there. A New Plymouth couple, far too young to remember the TV sitcom The Good Life, are channeling its suburban self-sufficiency ethos regardless. Carl and Katie Freeman have converted their quarter-acre section into a small-scale organic market garden, and now they want to teach others how to do it too. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin went along to take a look.
Tucked down a right-of-way in suburban Franklin Park, you'll find Freeman's Farms. An ex-state house proudly surrounded by beds of organic vegetables with chooks and ducks thrown in for good measure. Carl Freeman has spent the last 2 years working on his dream project, one he describes as an urban farm.
We moved from Australia. I was on a 6-acre market garden, organic market garden in Australia, and we moved over to Taranaki for the fantastic lifestyle and wanted to try out urban farming because I've seen a lot of stuff online on YouTube videos and stuff that people converting backyards, and I wanted to see if it could really be done.
And Carl's not one for half measures either.
We've got 50 veggie beds that are 5 metres wide at our urban plot here. We've got 26 fruit trees, we've got 2 beehives, we've got 5 chickens and 3 ducks.
So a little bit of poultry going on the side.
Yeah, the chickens just help us, eat all the veggie scraps that don't go to market, to the farmers market each Sunday. They're our recycling system. In exchange, they give us a few eggs, which is very kind of them.
The garden follows organic and no-dig farming principles and is topped up with about 3 cubic metres of organic compost every month. The Freemans grow a range of about 25 vegetables from seed, which they sell via order and at the local farmers market. Carl works in the garden 3 to 4 days a week and says he's able to pay himself a basic wage.
You're not going to get rich off it, but it's the good life. And I think, it's really nice to be close to home. We've got a 4-year-old son, so many fathers, unfortunately, are away at work, whereas I've been really close to him the whole time. And my partner, my wife, has been able to head off and do amazing work as well.
But rather than the English sitcom, Carl's inspiration is closer to home.
I remember visiting my granddad's property, and he had every square inch in fruit trees and everything like that, and lines and lines of preserved things on the shelves, and the chicken eggs piling up, and they were just such fond memories to me.
Now he's proven it can be done, the 35-year-old wants to share what he's learned.
I want to help create a new business model where people can, access their most direct neighbours. Maybe each urban farm's got their little neighbourhood that they deliver their veggie boxes off to or something like that, along with a local egg person, someone baking bread. This is a kind of vision I'd like to see in the future.
The Freemans have received a grant from the Provincial Growth Fund and want to begin offering short courses and 10-week one-on-one internships for people interested in urban farming. Carl says ultimately they'd also like to offer training at local tertiary education providers. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te ahi ponei, ko Robin Martin aho.
A bit of time for your feedback before the news. This is on our earlier story about speed limits and whether some open road speed limits should go down as low as 60 from 100 k's. Christine's been in touch and she says, I can't understand why the speed limit between Katikati and Tauranga has not already been reduced to 80. It is a killer highway, which I dread using. She says so many crashes, which are not all due to bad driving. The narrow bridges, winding road and the huge number of vehicles using it makes it so dangerous. We dread hearing the sirens, which we hear almost daily, she says. David, who's from Martinborough, says, I've been driving in New Zealand for over 60 years. I remember vividly my experience shortly after the speed limit was raised to 100 k's an hour. I was driving from Auckland to Wellington and I was consciously impressed by the absence of unsafe overtaking. If the limit is 80 k's an hour, he says, drivers who know the road is safe at 100 will use marginal opportunities to pass increasing dangerous journeys. So, David, David's going with the frustration defence, that drivers, I think, will get more frustrated with a lower speed limit. Ben says, I think the focus should be on driver training rather than lowering the speed limit. The issue is inexperienced drivers, not the speed, says Ben. Keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. After the news, sub-zero temperatures in Christchurch means life is even harsher for homeless down there.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The weather patterns that created the tornado at Cooper's Beach in the far north are continuing, with NIWA saying it may not be the last twister this week. Civil Defence is astonished no one was injured by the tornado, which struck about 10:30 this morning, leaving a trail of damaged roofs, smashed windows and flattened fences in its wake. At least 3 homes are too badly damaged for their occupants to return tonight. Twister hit about 100 metres away about 15 years ago, and Civil Defence Chief Colin Kitchen says the location is what makes Cooper's Beach vulnerable.
You know, the wind coming from the northeast and it's quite a funnel through Bergen's Point and Kerikeri Peninsula. It's funnels. It comes right across into the Doubtless Bay and then up the hill and away.
NIWA says the weather patterns that created the tornado are continuing and today's twister may not be the last this week. And heavy rain and wind is disrupting some travel throughout the Wellington region. Some flights have been delayed, but Air New Zealand says it hasn't had to cancel any yet. Cook Strait ferry sailings have not been affected, but Metlink says the Cross Harbour commuter ferry is operating to a restricted timetable. Motorists are being asked to avoid the pass of Brander between Breakers Bay and Setu because of a slip, and Kaifata Road in rural Wairarapa is closed due to flooding. National says the Treasury Secretary Gabriel McLoof should be standing down while his handling of a breach of budget details is investigated. The State Services Commission is looking into Mr McLoof's claim Treasury's websites had been hacked, the advice he gave the Finance Minister and his decision to contact the police. Deputy Leader Paula Bennett says it's extraordinary Mr McLoof is still working while the serious allegation he sat on a lie is being investigated.
I don't think it's tenable for him to be in his position as if nothing happened last week. I think it's such a senior role, and when you can't actually have confidence expressed in you by both the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister, then surely that says you step aside.
The State Services Commissioner Peter Hughes says while there are reasons why people are sometimes stood down during an investigation, this situation doesn't warrant that. The Minister in charge of road safety has rejected claims from the National Party reducing speed limits would slow down the economy. A tool used by the Transport Agency has suggested that speed limits should be as low as 60 kilometres an hour on some open roads. The National Party's transport spokesperson, Paul Goldsmith, says those speeds would slow the movement of freight and therefore cost the country more. But the Associate Transport Minister, Julianne Genter, says that crashes also cost the economy.
We don't have more efficient roads when we have lots of fatal crashes on our roads. That slows down traffic as well. So the idea that travelling at 10 kilometres an hour faster, 20 kilometres an hour faster on narrow, dangerous, windy roads is somehow better for the economy is just completely ridiculous.
Associate Transport Minister Julianne Genter. Australian federal police officers have raided the ABC Sydney headquarters over a series of 2017 stories known as the Afghan Files. The stories by ABC investigative journalists Dan Oakes and Sam Clark revealed allegations of unlawful killings and misconduct by Australian special forces in Afghanistan. They were based on hundreds of pages of secret defence documents leaked to the ABC. The ABC's editorial director, Craig McMurtry, says the broadcaster won't shy away from reporting difficult stories.
I invite anybody who wants to have another look at that content to take a look at it because it was clearly in the public interest and sometimes difficult truths have to be told.
Police officers have served the ABC legal team with a warrant and are searching for and copying onto hard drives information relating to the warrant. The High Court has ruled that Wellington City Council's consultation processes over a controversial cycleway in Island Bay met its legal obligations. Last month, the Island Bay Residents Association asked the court to review the way in which the cycleway was implemented. Anne-Marie May reports.
The association's lawyer described the City Council's decision-making relating to the cycleway as slipshod. However, the council's lawyer set out in detail the community consultation that had taken place before the cycleway was signed off. In the decision released this afternoon, Justice Churchman has rejected the association's case and dismissed the application for a judicial review. He says the Local Government Act does not oblige the council to accede to the view of a majority of the community, but the Residents Association's case was permeated with the idea that there was an express or implied obligation of that nature. In Wellington, Anne-Marie May.
A schoolboy is in hospital after impaling his leg in Southland. It happened at Thornbury School shortly after school finished this afternoon. The fire service was called in and an ambulance took the boy to Kew Hospital with moderate injuries. It's 6:05. Black Caps batsman Tom Latham believes his side's seam bowlers can give them the edge in tonight's Cricket World Cup clash in London. New Zealand bundled Sri Lanka out for 136 in their first game before crushing their opponents by 10 wickets in less than 17 overs. Bangladesh upset South Africa in their opening game. Vice-Captain Latham says the English pitches and conditions are similar to New Zealand's, and he's hoping the day-night game might provide some dew and some assistance to the Black Cap seamers.
For our bowling attack, we're used to bowling on our surfaces that do offer a little bit in terms of if there is a little bit more grass. So, hopefully we can apply that pressure that we're used to. And, I'm sure Bangladesh will be coming up with plans to, try counteract our seam attack. And I'm sure it's going to bode for a good contest.
And the match will be the first between the sides since Bangladesh's tour of New Zealand was cut short after the Christchurch mosque terror attacks. Rugby League has slammed the door shut on any chance of Israel Folau returning to the NRL following his sacking by Rugby Australia. The chair of the Australian Rugby League Commission, Peter Beattie, ruled out allowing the dual international back into the game, which made him a star, following his controversial social media posts. Reports in Australia say Folau was willing to offer the NRL the chance to vet any religious social media posts in exchange for his return. But Beattie has reiterated they won't rehire Folau. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights. Men on the Moon, Grand Old Men of Jazz and Peter Summer, director of the Norwegian doco The Men's Room, a movie about blokes getting together to drink, tell bad jokes and sing. I don't want no gun to stick no needle in me. That's Nights with Melody Thomas filling in for Brian Crump after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now looking at the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Waikato. Showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms. Southwest gales for a time overnight. Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Taumaranui, Waitomo and Taranaki. Rain with heavy falls and thunderstorms in the Bay of Plenty easing this evening. A few showers tomorrow turning to rain. Strong or gale northerlies changing to strong or gale southwesterlies. The Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, occasional rain, possibly heavy, clearing for a time tomorrow. Gales southwesterlies about the coast tonight, easing tomorrow. Whanganui and Taipei to Wellington, also Wairarapa. Periods of rain, possibly heavy. A few showers tomorrow, then evening rain. Southerly strengthening, gusting severe gale in Wellington, and then easing overnight. For Marlborough and Nelson, rain clearing this evening, then mainly fine. Gales southerlies about coastal Marlborough, easing overnight. Buller and Westland, rain tomorrow, possibly heavy, clearing in Westland later. Canterbury and Otago mainly fine with the odd shower tomorrow. For Southland and Fiordland, scattered showers, sometimes heavy with hail. And for the Chatham Islands, rain developing this evening and clearing later tomorrow. RNZ National, it is 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owens.
Thanks, Anna. A mini war zone, that's how the scene's being described at Cooper's Beach after a tornado swept through Doubtless Bay today. The chair of the Northland Civil Defence Group, Colin Kitchen, says more than a dozen houses were damaged.
There's roofs off, there's roller doors gone, there's windows gone, there's trampolines all over the place, there's fences gone. Yeah, so it's quite a bit of destruction here, about 100 metres wide, 100 to 200 metres wide. And we're very, very lucky that there's no injuries. So that's a plus.
But one local resident had a terrifying experience.
I know one person, they were in their conservatory at the time, and the whole conservatory's taken off, but it just went from around them. One elderly guy, but he's a bit shaken up, but it's jumped up. It's gone about 10 metres.
Colin Kitchen, who is the chair of the Northland Civil Defence Group, speaking about the tornado that whipped through Coopers Beach. Now, at the other end of the islands today, the Christchurch City Mission says it's struggling to keep up demand this winter as the cost of power and food skyrockets. For the first time this year, it ran out of food on its shelves, and other charities are feeling the strain as well. Our South Island reporter Logan Church and videographer Simon Rogers filed this report.
Central Christchurch is now cold, often raining. The people here commuting, grabbing a coffee, going about their business, are wrapped up in layers of jackets and scarves. Among them is Tepe, who is homeless.
31 years. Yeah, 31 years.
Tepe has been in and out of housing, but is back here on the street. Is there enough support for homeless people down here, do you think?
Yeah, there's some of them want to support the homeless and some of them won't support the homeless. That's the way how the homeless gets to the people, eh? That's why people where they treat the homeless, they think they're just, I think they're here.
One of the main support options is across town at the City Mission in Christchurch. The mission's food bank is stocked with canned food, among other things. But City Missioner Matthew Mark says it's been a tough year for many people.
In particular, actually, in some services we've had exponential growth, and some of that really has been a result of situations that we've encountered as a community. So where we look back to our March 15th events at the mosque, we've seen services such as our counselling work, our support work and our social service work has exploded in demand. And a lot of additional work around youth.
Considerable resource has been put into trying to get people off the streets of Christchurch. Among those is the Christchurch branch of Housing First, which was established here exactly 1 year ago. In September 2017, a city-wide count puts the number of people living on the streets in Christchurch at about 200. Since then, Housing First says it's housed 40 people. Matthew Mark says the mission's housed another 200.
That's not to say that we don't have anyone on the streets at the moment, because unfortunately it seems to be you'll house someone else will appear. But our numbers in our most recent assessment of those who are presenting on the street are more around 30 at the moment. So there's been a significant improvement in those who are really vulnerable in that housing space.
But of course it's not just homeless people who require the mission's services, especially as the cost of living continues to rise during winter.
There's been a constant climb in demand on our services. So even our food bank, we're standing in our food bank at the moment, we've had, on this time last year, we've had a 35% increase in demand, and that's significant. And through our food bank in the last 12 months, we've served almost 38,000 people in our Christchurch community. That's a lot of people out of a population of just under 500,000 people.
And for the first time this year, the mission ran out of food a few weeks ago.
We had to put a call out just recently because we ran out of tin food, and we go through 1,200 tins of baked beans and spaghetti every single week.
Other agencies are also in full swing, including the New Bryson Blankets Bank. It operates out of a small room in the New Bryson CBD, with the shelves of blankets stacked high on all four walls. One of its coordinators, Martha Baxendale, told me the charity gave out about 5,000 items last year, and they expect this year will be just as busy.
It's going out faster than it's coming in, definitely. We've got more sheets than warm blankets, but that's really normal at this time of year. Yeah, so we're looking for donations. We haven't had to turn anyone away yet this winter. We have had to do that in the past in winters where we've had a bit of a slow spot. But we're just chugging along, see how we go.
For now, though, it's just a case of getting these shelves stacked up with as much as possible as the winter chill sets in. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
And if you happen to be listening on the radio on your way home, you can look back at that story online from Logan Church and Simon Rogers. It'll be on our website and our Facebook page. It's about 14 after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Samoa's Ministry of Health has confirmed that the deaths of 2 babies last year were caused by nurses mixing the wrong liquid with their MMR vaccines. The 2 nurses will be sentenced this month after changing their plea to guilty this week. International health experts have visited Samoa in a bid to help improve vaccination systems. But as Alex Perrottet reports, it's a tough ask to get parents to trust the system again.
One nurse, Luce Emotauvale, has admitted to 3 charges of obstruction of justice, 2 of negligence and manslaughter, while Leatongi Teo has pleaded guilty to 1 charge of manslaughter. They are to be sentenced on the 18th of June. The Director-General of the Ministry of Health, Leausa, Dr. Take Naseri, says every vial of MMR vaccine should be mixed with 1 vial of diluent, but something went horribly wrong.
So it's a 1-to-1 diluent vaccine ratio. Now, during the monitoring, there were more diluents than the actual vial. So the question that comes to mind, so how were these vials diluted then? It happens to be it was mixed with the wrong solution.
So they have mixed the vial, but not with the diluent. They've mixed it with something else.
Yes, that was the problem.
Lea also says there should have been a better monitoring system in place, which would have easily picked up an uneven number of vials. Lea also says after the ministry's own investigation, officials became convinced that the vaccines themselves were safe and human error was to blame. Since the tragedy in July last year, representatives from the World Health Organization have visited, as well as a forensic pathology team from Australia. The MMR vaccination program was suspended immediately but was reinstated in April. But Lea also says despite the help they've received and the changes they've made, many parents have stopped bringing their children for all vaccines, not just the MMR, which has caused him grave concerns. But as RNZ Pacific's correspondent in Samoa, Aotangavaia Tipi Aotangavaia explains, it's not an easy task to convince them to come back.
The attitude was very negative towards the program. They're saying they don't want to take their children to the immunization program because of what they think what is going to happen. They don't want their children to be on the same situation like the 2 babies who died from the MMR.
Aotangavaia says it's very much up to the health ministry to regain that trust.
Like if you are a parent and I'm a parent too, if something like this tragic happened, the only answer to you is not to take your children for the immunization.
Lea also says he understands people's fears, but the alternative could be just as dangerous.
We are telling them the benefit of vaccine and the risk that their children will experience if they are not prevented from all these viral illnesses. This can be quite devastating.
Lea also says it's been an incredibly hard time for the parents of the children, and the nurses who have pleaded guilty this week have approached the family to apologise, but he is lost for words.
I really don't know what to tell the family. Such a tragic thing that happened at that age, very young age. Those 2 have a life to live. Now, what can I tell them? But it's just a mistake. It's just a pure mistake. When we have everything there, we should have done right, but these are very costly mistakes.
On the 16th of June, 8 New Zealand nurses will travel to Samoa to carry out on-the-job training. Elizabeth Powell from Counties Manukau Health says all the nurses speak Samoan and will visit district hospitals to train all vaccinating nurses in Samoa.
How you have to, check the vials with 2 people, make sure it's the right date, the right dose, the right drug. There's a whole procedure around that. So this is about reconfirming with these nurses that while they are registered nurses, that they are fit to practice, that they are really, really competent.
The Ministry of Health says it hopes the training will prevent such a tragedy ever happening again. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
Should secondary school students be allowed to use their phones during school hours? It's a discussion that's dominating debate at schools, particularly with the ease of access to social media. One private school in Auckland has already banned them and is urging others to do the same. Our reporter Jessie Chang has the story.
The familiar ring of the school bell signals a break from the classroom. For many students around the country, it's also a time to pull out their phones and check messages or watch videos. But as Margaret Van Maywin from the Diocesan School for Girls explains, that's no longer an option for students in years 7 to 10.
It really started this year when we looked around our playground and noticed that a number of girls were pretty much constantly on their devices, so phones and iPads and laptops which they use in their classroom. We felt it was a way to help our young people develop more face-to-face engagement with each other.
Margaret Van Maywin says a lot of the students are happy about the change.
We've certainly seen a much greater, particularly amongst the year 7 and 8s, much more interactive, imaginative play, just like the old days doing cartwheels on schoolhouse lawn, playing, chasey in the grounds and so on, much more active. There's more ball games happening that are student initiated, in the courtyards. We're really happy with the activity that now happens rather than girls sitting around in a group looking at a phone.
Junior students must turn their phones off and put them away during school hours. Occasionally, they are allowed to be used in the classroom for educational purposes, such as taking photos of notes. Margaret Van Maywin says other schools should consider banning phones, particularly with the rise of social media use. She says it's problematic that students can use their own data to access sites blocked by the school network.
Most of the poor behaviour that we witness at school starts somewhere in an internet context. So if we take away those devices during the school time, you're lessening that sense of having to be on social media all the time, commenting, asking for likes, etc. So really, I think it's something that we should all be considering in our schools.
But Tom Webb from the Auckland Secondary Schools Principals Association says the majority of schools haven't taken the blanket ban approach on phones.
I think they're a bit of a fact of life at the moment, and we need to learn how to use them without them becoming a distraction, and I think that's the route that most schools are taking.
The principal of Pakuranga College, Michael Williams, says their students are allowed to use their phones during the break.
It's about giving students lots of activities to do. If you're engaged and excited about something else to do in your break, then you're going to put the phone away and do that. So lots of activities around the school to engage students is the key thing. If you're sitting around bored, you'll probably pull your phone out, do something on your phone, text someone or play a game.
But Mr Williams says there's increasing debate around the impact of social media and phones in schools. NetSafe says online bullying has increased over the years and access to phones has contributed to that. Its chief executive, Martin Cocker, says it's difficult for schools to deal with.
Schools are dealing with these issues on a regular basis. They're carrying the burden, I guess, of the impact of technology on the social environment amongst the students. And I can understand why schools seriously consider, if not, do just ban the devices and try to make the problem go away.
There isn't currently a phone ban at Diocesan School for Girls for its seniors, but the school says there could be in the future. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Disi Changa ho.
KiwiSaver fund providers are being told they should take more responsibility for making sure customers are on the right tax rate. Inland Revenue is writing to 450,000 people to advise them they have been paying the wrong rate of tax on their KiwiSaver and other managed funds. However, providers are putting the ball back in the customer's court and say they frequently remind people to check their rates. Emma Hatton reports.
Nearly 500,000 New Zealanders have been paying the wrong amount of tax on their KiwiSaver and other managed funds, and are either facing a big tax bill at the end of the year or have missed out on a chunk of their retirement savings. Here's what IRD had to say about it in a statement.
Inland Revenue's new system is better able to see what rate people should be on, and we have sent letters to those people advising them what the correct rate should be. Consequently, some of these people may have had to pay a higher amount of tax this year than they were expecting.
Financial author and KiwiSaver expert Mary Holm says many are probably paying too much tax that will have had a huge impact on their KiwiSaver over the years.
Some people are in KiwiSaver for decades, and if they're paying too high a rate over all those years, they could end up with $50,000 or $100,000 less money at retirement.
The tax is called a PIR, a prescribed investor rate, and is either 10.5, 17.5 or 28%. It's based on your income for the past 2 financial years and may include money made off other investments, anything made off your KiwiSaver, for example. Unlike resident withholding tax, if you overpay, you can't apply for a rebate. Ms Holmes says those earning over $48,000 a year will fall into the 28% bracket, but for those earning less than that, it can be difficult to calculate the right rate. She says the fund providers should do more to make sure their customers are paying the right amount.
They are, after all, being given all this business by the New Zealand taxpayers The providers are making a lot of money from it. I think maybe they have to do a bit more work on making sure people are not paying too high a tax rate and not paying too low a tax rate.
There are 27 fund providers in New Zealand. One of them is Simplicity. Its manager, Sam Stubbs, says under law, all funds are required to remind their customers annually to check their rate.
We don't think that an awful lot of people have actually paid attention to that reminder very much, and they've just assumed that their tax rate stays the same all the time.
Mr Stubbs says consumers are used to not having to do much to keep their taxes in order, but for this they may need to make a bit of an effort. He says those who have underpaid their tax for years are unlikely to have to pay it all back now.
The idea is only asking them to correct it for this year's tax payment. So it's quite possible that quite a few people have been underpaying tax for quite some time and may well get away with it.
120,000 letters have already gone out, with the rest expected in the next few weeks. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
Thousands of rogue rabbits are forcing golfers off the green in a central Otago town. Members of the Roxburgh Golf Club say they're losing a battle against the bunnies, despite repeated poison drops, night shootings and the release of a rabbit control virus. Katie Todd reports.
The Roxburgh rabbits are running rampant, and golf club president Nigel Arneson is hopping mad. He says the problem has been steadily increasing for about 20 years, but has reached a point beyond a joke. Local golfers and dog walkers are falling victim to rabbit holes, losing golf balls and rolling their ankles, and visiting golfers are remarking, embarrassingly, on the vast quantities of poo.
People come and play on the course, other golfers, and they think we run sheep on the place. There's that much rabbit poo on it. They think we run mobs of sheep, and we don't. It's that bad.
The 18-hole golf course is on a reserve, but it's the golf club's responsibility to control pests. And every year there are attempts to thwart the rabbits with poison drops and night shootings. Last year, the Otago Regional Council released a rabbit hemorrhage disease to tackle the problem across the region. But Roxburgh Women's Golf Club captain Heather Hiscock says the results were disappointing. It wasn't enough to prevent a population boom on the golf course or to stem the rising cost of rabbit control.
It does cost us. We are a small club and we do struggle for funding. We had two quite major flooding issues in the last 2 years, which have cost us a lot of money. And then you've just got this rabbit problem, which is just another one of those things that is it's not going to be an easy fix.
Nigel Arneson is now looking to install a large fence to defend the green from the encroaching rabbit residents, which he says come up from the banks of the neighbouring Clutha River. But initial estimates put the cost of materials alone at $11,000, and it may be weeks until it can be built.
Well, we've got to have all the plans in place and then apply for grants. And we have got people at the council at the moment that are doing the plans and everything to try to get it through. They are being very helpful, but it's just bureaucracy really in that you've got to go through so many channels. But the council are helping us.
Meanwhile, Otago Regional Council Field Manager Trevor Crossan is dubious if the planned fence on one side of the course would be enough.
To be successful, they'd have to fence the whole area, I would imagine. You know, from what I could gather from him, they were just looking at putting a fence sort of along the top of one bank. They would certainly need quite a bit of fence to keep the rabbits off the whole course.
But he says the council are discussing options with the Roxburgh Golf Club. And Roxburgh Women's Golf Club Secretary Rosemary McNichol is hoping that may yield some extra funding towards a solution.
From my personal point of view, I think that we're looking after a important reserve that is so close to the town and for the council.
In the meantime, golfers are having to watch where they put their feet and where they wheel their golf bags. For Checkpoint, ko Katie Todd, tēnei.
And time for some of your feedback before we go this evening. Lowering the speed limits, a lot of feedback on this. This one says, most European countries show road tolls half of those in New Zealand, even though the speed limits are generally higher. Why? Because of a completely different system of driver training, this person says. In many countries, it's compulsory to take a minimum of 30 driving lessons, with a licensed driving instructor. Only then can one obtain a full driver's licence. Get rid of the ridiculous learner-restricted system, they say, and equip the next generation with real driving skills. Our road toll is due to a lack of proper training, not the current speed limits. Jared has got in touch and says, I'm against lowering of speed limits. It's a complete and literal waste of time. As a transport company owner and driver, it is absolutely clear that the level of skill of New Zealand drivers is terrible, says Jared. Speed limits throughout the EU and many other parts of the world are much higher than ours, and they have far lower accident rates. It's not the roads, it's not the speeds, and it's certainly not the cars, said Jared, as they are safer than they have ever been. It is poor skill, poor decisions, and a fundamental lack of understanding or adherence to the road code. Lowering the speed limit will only cause more frustration, leading to poor decisions, road rage, and of course accidents. And this one from Tess, who says, I'd be rapt if speed limits dropped ASAP. Our highways are death zones in many parts of New Zealand. We frequently travel on State Highway 60 from Nelson over to Golden Bay. Vehicles are barrelling along at 100k on the Nelson side with no barriers, dangerous intersections and no room for error. On Golden Bay side, ditto, but roads are winding, narrow and include one-way bridges with poor vision. I hang on to the Jesus bar, she says. What is the Jesus bar? Sorry for my ignorance. Someone should let me know. Anyway, Tess hangs on to the Jesus bar as we swing around yet another sharp corner. And that's only State Highway 60, she says. Time.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. NIWA says there could be more twisters like the tornado which wreaked havoc at Coopers Beach in the far north this morning. And heavy rain and strong winds are disrupting some travel in the Wellington region, with some flights delayed and harbour ferry crossings restricted. The Associate Transport Minister Julianne Genter has rejected National Party claims that reducing speed limits would slow down the economy, saying crashes are also costly. And the High Court in Wellington has dismissed an application for judicial review of a controversial Island Bay cycleway. Our next news and weather at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
The protest that I'm in the middle of now, there's a party atmosphere to it in a sense. So there's that anger, but there's also a carnival feel.
Lately is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Interestingly, all the councillors were invited to